February 26, 1959, a search party reaches a remote slope in the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia. What they find stops them completely. A tent, abandoned, supplies still inside, food half-eaten, boots left behind, and the tent itself cut open, not unzipped, not torn by wind, cut deliberately from the inside. The 9 people who made those cuts were found nearby, dead, half a mile away in the snow, in -30-degree temperatures, some in their underwear, some completely barefoot, walking away from the tent, away from their supplies, away from their only chance of survival. No signs of struggle, no avalanche debris, no predator tracks, just 9 experienced hikers who, for reasons nobody has ever officially explained, walked out of their tent in the middle of the night into a deadly blizzard and never came back. The Soviet government classified the investigation within weeks. The files stayed buried for 60 years. This is Dyatlov Pass. Before we talk about how they died, we need to understand who these people were, because this is not a story about inexperienced hikers making fatal mistakes. This is a story about the best of the best. January 23, 1959. 10 hikers depart from the city of Ivdel in the Soviet Union, led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student and experienced mountaineer. His team are all students and graduates of the Ural Polytechnic Institute, trained, fit, experienced in extreme winter conditions. This is not their first expedition, not even close. Their destination is Mount Otorten, a remote peak in the northern Urals. Challenging, but well within their capabilities. One member, Yuri Yudin, turns back early due to illness. He is the only one who comes home alive. He spends the rest of his life trying to understand what happened to his friends. He dies in 2013, still without an answer. The remaining 9 continue into the mountains. They set up camp on a slope called Kholat Shyakhl, in the local Mansi language. That name translates directly to one thing: Dead Mountain. When search parties finally reach the camp on February 26th, they find something that no amount of training prepares them for. The tent is there, everything inside it. Food, equipment, all 9 pairs of boots, left behind deliberately. The tent has been cut open from the inside with a knife, multiple cuts made in a hurry. Leading away from the tent in the snow are 9 sets of footprints, barefoot, socked feet, 1 shoe, moving in a calm, orderly line away from camp toward the tree line below, not running, walking, which is perhaps the most disturbing detail of all. Whatever made 9 experienced hikers abandon their tent in -30 degrees did not make them panic. They walked out calmly into certain death. The first 2 bodies are found at the tree line, barefoot, underwear only, hands burned as if they had tried to build a fire with their bare hands. Cause of death, hypothermia. 3 more bodies are found nearby: Igor Dyatlov himself, Zina Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin, all found as if crawling back toward the tent, as if they changed their minds, as if something that drove them away had passed, and they were trying to return. They never made it. Then in May, when the snow melts, the final 4 are found in a ravine, and this is where the story stops making any sense at all. These 4 had injuries that the lead investigator described as consistent with a car crash at high speed, massive internal trauma, fractured ribs, a crushed skull, but no external wounds, no bruising on the skin, as if the force came from a pressure wave rather than a physical blow. One hiker, Lyudmila Dubinina, was found with her tongue completely removed, her eyes missing, her lips gone. The official explanation was that small animals had eaten the soft tissue after death, but her tongue was not on the ground, not nearby. It is simply gone. Traces of radioactivity were found on multiple items of clothing, and then came the detail the Soviet government tried hardest to bury. Multiple independent witnesses in the area that night reported seeing strange glowing orange spheres moving through the sky above the mountains. A separate group of hikers 50 kilometers away reported them. A local meteorological station recorded them. These reports were collected, classified, and never publicly released until decades later. Here is where this stops being a mystery and becomes something else entirely. The lead investigator in 1959 was a man named Lev Ivanov. In 1990, over 30 years after the investigation, he gave an interview. He said this, and I want you to hear it clearly. He was ordered to close the case. Ordered by authorities above him. He was told to classify the findings. He personally believed the glowing spheres in the sky were connected to the deaths. He said he was told not to pursue that line of investigation. The Soviet government closed the area where the hikers died to all visitors for 3 years after the incident. Not 1 year, 3. A military-grade exclusion zone around a location where 9 hikers supposedly died from a natural force. The official verdict was death by an unknown compelling force. That phrase, written into a government document. Unknown compelling force. No further explanation. Case closed. The families of the 9 hikers were never given a full explanation. They were told to stop asking questions. Some were visited by officials and strongly advised to let the matter rest. In 2019, 60 years later, the Russian government announced it was reopening the investigation. The world waited. After a full new investigation, their conclusion was that it had been an avalanche after all. There is just one problem. The original 1959 investigation specifically ruled out an avalanche. There was no debris. The slope angle was too low. Every physical feature of the site was inconsistent with an avalanche. The families of the victims publicly rejected the 2019 conclusion. Researchers rejected it. The lead investigator's own notes reject it. And the files that were released in 2019 were not complete. Pages were missing. Sections were redacted. The full classified archive from 1959 has never been made public. So if it was not an avalanche, what was it? 3 theories have emerged over 60 years, each one more disturbing than the last. The first, Soviet military weapons testing. In 1959, the Soviet Union was actively testing ballistic missiles in the Ural region. A pressure wave from a failed weapons test could cause massive internal injuries with no external wounds. Exactly what the autopsies described. The radioactivity on the clothing fits. The glowing spheres in the sky fit. The 3-year military exclusion zone fits. And the lead investigator being ordered to close the case fits completely. The second, infrasound. Sound at frequencies too low to hear but powerful enough to feel. Studies show infrasound at certain frequencies causes overwhelming panic, paranoia, and hallucinations. The shape of Kolatsyakl under strong winds could generate exactly this. If 9 experienced hikers were suddenly gripped by an unexplainable animal terror, they would have done exactly what they did. Cut the tent, run, scatter, desperate to escape something they could feel, but not see. The third, the orange spheres. Multiple independent witnesses saw glowing orange objects in the sky above the Urals that night. A meteorological station recorded them officially. These reports were gathered by investigators, then classified, then buried. The lead investigator himself stated 30 years later that he personally believed the spheres were connected to the deaths. What were the spheres? The files that would tell us are still classified. So what happened on Dead Mountain on the night of February 1st, 1959? Here is what we know as fact. 9 experienced hikers cut their way out of their tent from the inside. That is a fact. They walked calmly into -30 degrees with no boots and no clothing. That is a fact. 4 of them suffered internal injuries consistent with extreme pressure, with no external wounds. That is a fact. 1 had her tongue removed, with no explanation. That is a fact. Radioactivity was found on their clothing. That is a fact. Glowing orange spheres were seen in the sky that night by multiple independent witnesses. That is a fact. The lead investigator was ordered to close the case and classify the findings. That is a fact. The area was sealed for 3 years. That is a fact. And 60 years later, when Russia finally released the files, pages were missing. These were not reckless students making amateur mistakes. These were the best trained mountaineers of their generation. Whatever they encountered on that slope was something they had never seen before. Something powerful enough to make 9 experienced professionals abandon every survival instinct they had. Something the Soviet government decided the world should never know about. Yuri Yudin, the one who turned back early, lived with the guilt of survival for over 50 years. In his final interview before his death, he said one thing that has stayed with me. He said he believed his friends did not die from nature. He believed they were killed, and he believed someone knew exactly what happened and chose to stay silent. The files are still classified somewhere in a Russian government archive. The full truth of what happened on Dead Mountain has never been told, and maybe it never will be. If this made you think, hit subscribe, because the truth is always darker than what they tell you. Drop in the comments. What do you think really happened at Dyatlov Pass? See you in the next one.